The biggest mistake I see is people posting their same exact podcast episode over to YouTube. The same exact title, description, everything. Is that you? And if it's you, don't worry, it was also me at one moment. But you can't keep doing that and then wonder why you're not seeing the results. The way I think of it, if you're doing it correctly, there's no reason why that channel, even if it's a new channel, only using your podcast episodes wouldn't be monetized in 6 months. If you're doing it correctly, that's what you're going to see. And we're not only talking about the monetization aspect, it's actually getting more people to your podcast listening and hearing everything that you have to say. Let me explain a little more about why this happens. YouTube is a searchable platform. And yes, you might already know that, a lot of people say that, but you might not understand how it works. So the goal is that not only the people that already know you see and hear your podcast on YouTube, but that you reach even more people. And that's the powerhouse that YouTube has the potential to use for your podcast. You're just not using it correctly. So just like it's a searchable platform, people are searching for the topic that you're mentioning, that you're discussing, that you're interviewing somebody about on your podcast, but right now you're losing out on that visibility just because you're not formatting it in the right direction. So basically, if you're doing a podcast episode on it and it's worth doing a podcast episode on it, then it's worth also uploading it to YouTube. Let's go ahead and get started to how this is all done. Number one, you're going to switch the title into a question. So right now you're probably something along the lines of meet blah 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 if you have a guest, or the winning formula here, scaling here, investing here, whatever your podcast is on, right? But really the right way to post it on YouTube is in a question form. So how would you ask that question? Rephrase the main topic that you're hitting during that podcast episode and put it into a question. So for example, let's say that this were a podcast episode. So instead of putting it as posting your podcast to YouTube, how to post your podcast the right way to YouTube. Are you posting your podcast to YouTube correctly? So you see how I'm asking a question? Normally, we like to do it in a way that a person would search for it on Google. So think about how a person searches for it and use that as your title. Of course, there are tools that are going to help you out on this. If you've never done this before, then I recommend you to use TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is a tremendous platform, and I'm even going to link it down below so that you can get it for 30 days for free. And it's going to basically give you a score depending on how you're changing up that title into a question phrase. And what you want is for that score to be as high as it can be. Now, we're about to get really, really juicy in the tips. But before we jump onto the juicy tips, I want to let you know that remember that this is a whole series. So in the next video, I'm going to tell you the winning content formula so that you can basically piece all of this together. Use your podcast to not only have a podcast, but have a winning content strategy that incorporates your podcast. So I'm basically going to be teaching you how you're going to pair this searchable episode that you're doing now with a community building platform. All you have to do is turn on that notification bell and set your alarm to meet me right back here at 12 p.m. Eastern Time a week from today. I promise you, you do not want to miss out on this if you're looking for that growth in your podcast and in your content as a whole. Now let's continue with the juicy tips. So you found out a winning title that asks your title in a question. Now what you want to do is find the winning tags. What you do is the same thing. You use TubeBuddy and you use that and see what are alternative ways that you can say that same exact phrase and get more people to watch that video. So for example, just like I gave you the example of this video that I'm currently doing. So I can not only say it in the way that I showed you before, how to post your podcast to YouTube, the right way of posting a video podcast on YouTube, the biggest mistake when posting your podcast to YouTube. So there are infinite ways of saying the same thing and still trying to get people to that same exact goal mine, which is your video podcast on YouTube. So make sure that you find tags. When you're uploading your podcast to YouTube, you're going to have 500 character spaces to fill in those tags. You need to make sure that you have enough tags to fill in the majority of those spaces. So the more tags that you can find, the better. Of course, to do all that, I also recommend using TubeBuddy. It's the same exact process that you did to find the title, but now you are going to add it in the tag section instead of the title on YouTube during your uploading process. Thumbnails are another huge aspect that you probably haven't thought about or put that much time into consideration. Well, thumbnails are really the deal breaker between is somebody going to click on that or am I just going to keep scrolling? That's why it has to be something that appeals to the audience and that makes somebody want to click on it. So don't try to put in your entire podcast title with the text that's super, super tiny when the majority of people are scrolling from mobile view on YouTube and that thumbnail looks mini, super mini where we can't even read it, okay? Don't try to put everybody's picture that's on the podcast because obviously we also are getting distracted by so many faces that we don't even know if we should click on this podcast. What if I don't know who that person is, all right? There are many factors that you have to put into consideration at the moment when you're designing your thumbnail. Just as important is your description. Your description, the way I see it, it's like SEO lottery tickets waiting to be played. And if you're not doing it correctly, then you're leaving all those lottery tickets on the table. So the way that you have to structure your description for it to be pulled in by SEO, think of it just as if you were creating a website. If you have previous experience with website SEO, then you know how important this is. On YouTube, you have to use the main keywords that you used in your tags throughout your entire description. That way you're telling the platform what it's about, and it has to also match with what's in the title, the tags, as I mentioned, and reiterate that in the description. My favorite way of doing it is basically writing out a paragraph, trying to cover as many of the keywords that I use in my tags and in my title, and then I have that underneath. It doesn't have to be at the top where, it's kind of basically obstructing the nice aesthetic view, but you can have it all the way at the bottom and YouTube will still pull it in. Now, another key thing that is going to help your podcast rank even higher on YouTube, get seen and get heard even more, is creating playlists. And not that many people know about it, even people that are up on YouTube. So think of playlists as different segments that you can have for your podcast. You can either have a full one if you want to just have everything under one playlist. You can have it with guests, solo podcasts, even by different topics. You can segment and basically streamline all these different topics into different playlists. And therefore, when somebody just clicks on a playlist, they listen to one episode, then the next, and then the next. Now imagine that visibility for not only your podcast, but whatever you're discussing inside that podcast. It's amazing. Just imagine the results that you can have with that. And I'm even gonna throw in a little bonus for you right here. So just like that, you also want to add a link where that person can take an action. So during your podcast, you either mention something or you want to promote something. Well, on YouTube, you can do the same exact thing in your description. And actually, you can put infinite amount of links. Of course, you don't want to saturate your consumers and those that are consuming your podcast, but you do want to make sure that there are different links where they can take an action. And I don't know if you've already thought about this, but just in case you haven't, this is a win-win if you already have sponsors or you're thinking about having sponsors in your podcast. Imagine you negotiating and saying, hey, not only am I posting it on the podcasting app, but also on YouTube. It's a win-win not only for you, also for them. And of course, if you're promoting something that your audience is going to love, well, it's a win-win for them too. So it's like a triple win that you're missing out on if you're not doing this process correctly. Now, before we go, remember that next week I'm teaching you the winning content formula to put your podcast together so that you create a content system with a flow that's easy to follow. You better not miss out on it. I want to see you right back here a week from today at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Set your alarm, ring that notification bell so that you're notified, and I'll see you right back here. Bye-bye.